Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for coming. My name is Roberta Schaefer, and I'm the president of the Research Bureau. And we would like to express our gratitude to MCPHS University for hosting not only today's forum, but many of the Research Bureau's events. And we join the large chorus of those who thank Charlie Monahan and his team for the generosity to our organizations for the transformative effect of the university on downtown Worcester. And I'd like to introduce Deborah O'Malley, who is the Vice President and General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer, to bring greetings from the university. Deborah?
Good morning and welcome. President Monahan just keeps giving titles, and I tell people same job, bigger target. I welcome you to MCPHS University. We have recently changed the branding of our school, and the president would like people to know a little bit about the school, the college, the university. MCPH University is 190 years old. We're in our 190th year. Most people don't realize that since their appearance in Worcester is relatively new. But the university is the oldest college or university in the city of Boston, remembering that Harvard is in Cambridge. We are expanding in Worcester because the college's campus in Boston, the main campus, is in the Longwood Medical area where there's not 1 square inch to expand. So everyone in Worcester sees the college's footprint growing in downtown Worcester as we work to educate the next generation of health professionals in nursing, pharmacy, physical therapy, optometry. I'm going to miss somebody. There are more programs than that don't come to mind. But the president is always looking for new opportunities to expand the university's programs. And I'm especially glad to be here today because I am a graduate of the Worcester Public Schools. I went to Lee Street School, Forest Grove Junior High at the time, it's now a middle school, and Doherty Memorial High School. And my father was a career-long employee of the Worcester Public Schools. He retired as principal of Burncoat Senior High School. So I have a lot of connections to the Worcester Public Schools. My brother is the assistant principal at Doherty Memorial High School. My sister has been a special education teacher for her whole career in the Worcester Public Schools. So I am a big supporter of yours, Superintendent Dr. Boone, and I welcome you. And we all have to work together. Colleges, high schools, universities. Education is the answer, and by your presence here, you're acknowledging that. So I welcome you, and thank you very much. Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you very much for being here, Deborah. Today's program is part of the Research Bureau's Francis Harrington Forums on Municipal Government, and it is sponsored by the Hanover Insurance Group, and I'd like to recognize the folks from Hanover who are here today, Paul Belcito and Jennifer Luisa. Thank you very much for your sponsorship. The Research Bureau also wishes to express its appreciation to the Telegram and Gazette for advertising today's event. And we'd like to make sure that you go to our website, www.wrrb.org, where you can see all of our reports and announcements of upcoming events. We also want to thank Penta Communications for arranging videos of our forums to be seen through a link on our website. This spring, we're planning several provocative forums and releasing some interesting reports, so please watch for upcoming announcements. Today's forum on the Worcester Public Schools, Successes and Challenges, continues the Research Bureau's longstanding interest in raising student achievement. Our latest report discusses the value of establishing a high school for academically talented students. In that report, and in others, we have noted the important link between the public schools and the business community for providing an educated workforce and an attractive, vibrant community in which to raise families. Hence, we have asked Richard Burke, who is the current chairman of the Worcester Regional Chamber of Commerce and a member of the Research Bureau's board, to moderate this distinguished panel. Richard's day job is that he's at Fallon Community Health Plan. He's been a member of the Fallon Community Health Plan's senior management team since 1998. He's currently the president of Senior Care Services and Government Programs Chief Compliance Officer. Please join me in welcoming Richard as the moderator.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Roberta. And I'd like, as a Research Bureau board member, to also thank the Hanover Insurance Group and the other sponsors of this event. So my job is fairly straightforward. Try to keep the program on time and to introduce to you this distinguished panel. So I will begin by introducing each of the panel members, and then we'll start with Commissioner Chester. So our first speaker will be Mitchell Chester, who began serving as Commissioner of the Massachusetts Public Schools in May 2008, after being unanimously selected by the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. He began his career as an elementary school teacher in Connecticut, and later served as a middle school assistant principal and district curriculum coordinator. From there, Commissioner Chester moved to the Connecticut State Department of Education, where he oversaw curriculum and instructional programs. In 1997, he was named the Executive Director for Accountability and Assessment for Philadelphia, where he headed the offices of Assessment Research and Evaluation, Student and School Progress, and Pupil Information Services. In 2001, he moved to Ohio, where he served as the Senior Associate Superintendent for Policy and Accountability for the Ohio Department of Education. The Commissioner has presented nationally on accountability, assessment, and teacher induction and retention. He has served as a consultant to states and school districts regarding curriculum and instruction, teacher evaluation, student achievement, and assessment and accountability. He holds a doctorate in administration, planning, and school policy from Harvard University, as well as advanced degrees from the University of Connecticut and the University of Hartford. Our second speaker will be Dr. Melinda Boone, who became superintendent for the Worcester Public Schools in July 2009, a district with over 23,000 students and 44 schools. Dr. Boone previously served as Chief Academic Officer for the Norfolk Public Schools in Norfolk, Virginia. Dr. Boone has served as a speech and language pathologist for Suffolk Public Schools in Suffolk, Virginia, Director of Special Education for Franklin City Public Schools in Franklin, Virginia, Coordinator of Pupil, Personnel, and Testing for the Suffolk Public Schools, Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services with the Isle of Wight County Public Schools in Virginia. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Disorders with a pre-med emphasis from Hampton University, a Master of Arts in Audiology from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and a doctorate in education from the College of William and Mary. Dr. Boone is a 2004 Fellow of the Broad Urban Superintendent's Academy. Her stated goal is to make the Worcester Public Schools into the preferred educational choice for families. She's a board member of the United Way of Central Mass, a board member of the Worcester Public Library Foundation, and a leadership team member of Pioneering Healthier Communities in Worcester. And our third speaker will be Morton Orloff. Mort is president of the Mass Math and Science Initiative, which is implementing the Advanced Placement Training and Award Program in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He was formerly the principal of Chelsea High School. During his tenure there, he expanded the AP program and implemented an attendance initiative program. He previously served as chairman of the Department of Military Science at Boston University. In addition to his academic background, he served for 23 years as an infantry officer in the United States Army in a variety of command and staff positions. He holds a bachelor's degree from Tufts University and a Master of Military Arts from the School of Advanced Military Studies in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. We're going to begin with a presentation by Commissioner Mitchell Chester. We've asked each of our speakers to hold their remarks to approximately 10 minutes so that we leave time for your questions. Commissioner Chester.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me back. It's been a couple of years since I've been at a Research Bureau event, so I'm really pleased to be here. Appreciate the invitation from Roberta, and really glad to be here with the Worcester community. I'm going to do a couple things in my 10 minutes. First, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sense of Worcester, where you are now as a school district and where you've come from. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the statewide trends that I see, and specifically what the implications are for Worcester. Going to hone in on a couple of areas in that regard. One is what's happening with our lowest performing schools, and the second area is going to be around district budgets with a particular emphasis on compensation. First of all, I looked at some data over the last 24 hours for Worcester. You're a district whose enrollment is on the rise, but below where you were 10 years ago. So you've had a substantial dip, but in the last 5 years, that enrollment's picking up. And it's picking up with a more diverse population. The percentage of limited English proficient students, low-income students, students of color, is much higher today than it was a few years ago. Through that same period, you've had tremendous productivity over the last 5 years. Just nothing but an upward trend in the district-wide results. There's some variation from school to school, no question about that. But when you look at the kind of progress that's been made in the school district, it's substantial. It's really substantial. I'll give you a couple of highlights. Grade 10, which, as you know, is a requirement for graduating from high school in Massachusetts. On the 10th grade test in ELA, you've had a 24-point increase in the last 5 years in the percentage of students who are scoring proficient or advanced, which is an important marker. You've had a 14-point increase in the percentage of students who are scoring proficient or advanced in mathematics. The 24-point increase is in English language arts. The 14-point is in mathematics. Absolutely kind of what I think of as an important threshold for our young people. It's not about the scores. For me, it's what the scores represent. When you see that kind of increase, you can have really good confidence that what's happening in schools is more students are learning how to read and write better. More students are learning math and the application of math a lot better. Two really critical markers: dropout rates and graduation rates. And we've seen Worcester absolutely improve in both of those categories. The dropout rate for the district today is about a third of what it was just 6 or 7 years ago. 1/3 of what it was 6 or 7 years ago. And the graduation rate has increased by over 4 points. And this is the 4-year graduation rate. We track 4-year and 5-year graduation rates, but the reason 4-year graduation rates are so critical. So this is looking at students who were first-time freshmen 4 years ago. How many have a high school diploma in hand 4 years later? And that's come up over 5 points. And the reason again that's so critical is students who don't make it through in 4 years are at a greatly increased risk of not making it through at all. Some do, some stick with it, some get a diploma after 5 years, some after 6. But once you're in the cohort that hasn't made it through in 4 years, your likelihood of finishing is greatly reduced. I have to tell you, if it hasn't come through in my comments, I am a huge fan of your superintendent. I think that Superintendent Boone has done an incredible job with this assignment, and through her leadership, she's really taken on the challenges of a district that can do better and is just leading the way toward better results for the city of Worcester. Let me turn my comments to a couple of pieces that I have a really close eye on statewide. One is our lowest performing schools. And in Worcester, and we have different ways of sort of identifying those schools. And we have a new statutory authority to be very aggressive with the schools that are identified. In particular, we have what's referred to as the Achievement Gap Act of 2010. So it's now 3 years old. This act was signed into law by Governor Patrick on Martin Luther King Day in 2010. And this act provides substantial authorities, initially for school districts and then ultimately for the state, in the case of those schools that have been identified as underperforming. We have at this point in time identified 43 schools in these first 3 years throughout the Commonwealth that are in this category. 3 of them, I believe, 3 are in Worcester. Those are the Chandler, the Burncoat, and the Union Hill schools, Burncoat Prep and the Union Hill School. The largest number are in Boston. There's 12 in Boston. There are 10, I believe, in Springfield. And in the event of that identification for those 43 schools, in the first 3 years, local school districts have to develop a turnaround plan for those schools and have to set some performance targets. And we, the state, watch them very closely in terms of the progress that they make. And the early results at Union Hill and Chandler in particular, I would argue, are pretty promising. The verdict's still out. We're not yet 3 years through this first cohort of schools that we identified. So we continue to keep our eye closely on these. But what happens is at the end of 3 years, the state has to make a decision on the status of these schools. Have they improved enough that we remove them from this underperforming category? Are they making progress, but we're not yet confident that they're out of the woods, so we'll continue the status of underperforming? Or are we so alarmed at the inability to make progress after 3 years that we have the authority to take them over? So we have a range of options at the state level, and we're just shy of that 3-year mark where we'll be making those decisions on the first 34 of those 43 schools, the first 34 that are in their 3rd year of turnaround. We've been tracking very closely what seems to distinguish those that after 1 year, after 2 years, are making really good progress from those who after 1 year, after 2 years, don't seem to be making much progress, and in some cases are actually regressing. And we've got some emerging understanding, and I'm careful to call it emerging because I think our insight into this is going to improve the more we look at this. But we have a paper on our website about emerging practices, and I'll just highlight 2 of them for you that are pretty intriguing. So one of them is this notion of data-driven decision-making. This is a mantra in education, data-driven decision-making. So it turns out that I can walk into almost any one of these 43 schools and I'll see very, very vivid evidence of the use of data. These schools will be giving students assessments at various intervals throughout the year. They'll be identifying students who are on a trajectory that gives the school confidence, or likewise they'll identify students who are on a trajectory that doesn't give them confidence. Often they'll color code. Often I'll see what's called a data wall. It might be in the principal's office. It might be a separate room in the school. I'll see color-coded green, yellow, red tags with students' names and so forth. What's interesting is I'll always ask the school officials that when I'm in these schools, so what do you do with this information? I mean, you know, just there's an old adage comes out of the agricultural community: weighing the cow doesn't make it any fatter, right? So what do you do with this information? And the kind of response I get varies tremendously. From in some schools, folks just sort of look at me, not really clear what they do with it. They collect it. But in other schools, they can be very articulate about how they have meetings, how they make decisions about regrouping students, about pulling students out for extra attention, extra help, and so forth. That turns out to be a real key. Everybody says they're using data, but do the schools have in place protocols, expectations, accountability around the use of the data that in a way that informs instructional decision making? I'll give you a second indicator here, and this one will lead into my final comments about the budget, fiscal, and contracts. And the second observation that we're noticing is that in some of these schools, because again, the authorities are pretty substantial, and some superintendents have been very aggressive in restaffing in these schools. So in some cases, they've said to all the teachers who were in these schools at the time they're identified as underperforming, they've said, you need to reapply. And there's no guarantee that you're going to be, if you do reapply for a position in this school, there's no guarantee that you're going to have that position. And in fact, in many of these schools, you will see a substantially different staff today than you did the year before they were identified. In some cases, well over 50% of the staff is new. In some cases, it's upwards of 80% of the staff is new. And in other schools, you'll see relatively small turnover. Maybe 10, 20, 30% of the staff is new 3 years later. And what we're seeing is that in general, and there are exceptions, in general, it is the high flyers, the ones who after the first 1 or 2 years in this status, who have made substantial changes in staffing, are doing substantially better than the ones that have not. And so we continue to watch this. These are kind of emerging trends. But that's a bridge into the issue of contracts and budgets. So why link contracts and budgets? Well, it turns out that in a typical school district, 75–80% of the spending is on compensation, is on salaries. We're a very, very human-intensive enterprise, and the majority of our spending goes into our personnel costs. And it turns out that over time, and my comments will focus primarily on the teacher contract, over time, what's emerged as a very, very standard practice in this industry is that we pay for years on the job, and we pay for accumulation of advanced credits or going back to school in some form. And we now have a really good sense, really strong sense based on data, that those two pieces have limited nexus to productivity, right? To whether or not I'm an effective teacher or not an effective teacher. And it turns out that there's great variability in effectiveness of our teaching force. We have teachers who routinely, year after year, get tremendous learning gains for their students. 2 years of learning gains consistently. And we have teachers who consistently, year after year, don't get very good learning gains from their students. There's tremendous variability. And there's a lot of research, and that research just continues to accumulate on that variability. And the impact on students of having an effective teacher for multiple years in a row versus having an ineffective teacher for multiple years in a row. The impact is profound. It's profound. But it turns out that until recently, we haven't had great tools for measuring effectiveness. And we're now doing a much better job of measuring effectiveness. Now, I want to be clear, this is controversial. It's, it's politically fraught and so forth and so on. But we have better and better tools. Roberta mentioned Tom Kane's doing the presentation this afternoon. He's done some of the most groundbreaking research, I suspect. If you go to this, you'll hear about this, that brings probably the most recent study in an increasing array of studies about this notion of effectiveness and the fact that we can measure it pretty accurately. And it turns out we can measure the tails a lot better. We can measure the chronic underperformers and the chronic overachievers. What we can't do very well is we can't get a beat on, am I at the 50th versus the 40th percentile? But if I'm a chronic underperformer, a chronic overperformer, a strong performer, we're getting a really good beat on that. We're getting a very good beat on that in Massachusetts. We're using our state testing program and as students move up the grades to measure learning gains from one year to another that we can now assign to teachers. Turns out it's got limited application because only about 20% of our teaching force teaches in the grades in which we're testing, grades and subjects in which we're testing. But what we very rarely do is we very rarely tie compensation to productivity. And we know that we have a lot of research that again, time in seat, because we're paying for longevity. We pay more for each year you're in your seat. It turns out that your first 5 years you become typically, again, there's always exceptions, become a tremendous period of growth and maturation as a teacher. But beyond that 5 years, very little evidence that for most people, successive years teaching result in better and stronger performance. And likewise, in terms of the accumulation of credits or degrees. Now, there is some evidence that particularly in math and science, that may be an exception. That getting advanced education in those areas may in fact be associated with increased effectiveness. But I'm very interested in new compensation schema, new contracts that get at what do we pay for, and let's start to build in components that deal with effectiveness. Let's not be afraid of that, because that's our children, our students' passport to a better future. And then secondly, let's start to be more deliberate about our assignment provisions within our contracts, because we need to be able to move our strongest teachers, our strongest administrators to the schools that are serving the kids who most need them. And so those are my opening comments. I look forward to the rest of the program.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Chester. And you did a great job of setting the table for our superintendent. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Melinda Boone, Superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools.
Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to spend time with the Research Bureau and the community in this forum. And I certainly want to also acknowledge the key sponsors today of the Mass College as well as Hanover, two critical partners with the work in the Worcester Public Schools, and we're very excited about this. I have a huge challenge this morning in terms of addressing the successes and the challenges of Worcester Public Schools within 10 minutes. I think those who have been chronicling at least my tenure here as superintendent, we've been very clear about where our progress has been and where our challenges still remain. And so I'll do won't be shy and do the commercial. I would ask you to look forward to this fall when once again I will deliver a State of the Schools message. The purpose of that is to give a comprehensive report to the community in terms of our progress in areas that we remain focused on. But to make sure that everyone has a takeaway from my remarks today, let me couch it this way. The issues that I will share as the greatest successes that are occurring in the Worcester Public Schools will also parallel those areas that are our challenges going forward, because they go hand in glove. They're very clear. We're making progress, and yet where progress is happening, we have to figure out how we continue to go deeper with that work and to sustain it over time. I'm honored to share this morning's panel with Commissioner Chester and Mort Orloff, two of whom the Commission and I can agree to disagree, and we also challenge a great deal philosophically in what's happening in education across the Commonwealth and the nation. And it's an exciting time to be a superintendent, despite the changing environment of fiscal issues, of increased accountability for student learning and outcomes, and as well as the general changing landscape of education in this country. And so it's good to have a commissioner that we can have those deeper conversations about, and it's not just about how do we check off where we are on the list. And so I certainly appreciate that and the work that Mort has been doing with the district prior to my arrival, and that continues, and you hear about that. In 2009, I issued to the community and to the school committee the Worcester Compact, which was our commitment to improving student outcomes. In that original compact, we addressed at least 80% of our students would be on grade level reading, at least 80% of our students would be on grade level in mathematics expectations as identified and measured through the MCAS, and 100% of our students would have access to a rigorous core curriculum that leads to college and career readiness at the high school level. Very, very ambitious, very, very far-reaching goals. And today we have a mixed set of results on those goals. But without reaching high, we would stay where we were, which was at a level of complacency and contentment with marginal achievement over time. And so we've not reached that 80% standard yet, but we are closer than we have been. And so when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts applied for a waiver from the No Child Left Behind requirements, allowing us to then create our statewide benchmarks and rubrics for success, again, I've now updated that compact to reflect the goals within the next few years that are designed and set forth by the Commissioner and the Board of Education relative to successes we should have. And those goals, ladies and gentlemen, are even higher than the ones that we set. And so there were many people who said, that's ridiculous. Why would you set those high goals? We are now poised and we have the mindset to understand that where we've been does not represent where we're headed and does not represent where we can stay. And yet we have to really redouble our efforts for success. And the success for me is not about what happens to the schools individually, but what happens to each individual student becomes the indicator of how well the schools are doing. See, if we focus on school achievement goals, whether schools are level 1, level 5, then we can certainly get those bumps to protect a school. But what do the students leave the school with? It has to be about student learning first. And if we approach student learning in the appropriate way, we will get those results building by building and meet those expectations. We have 4 areas, key areas in our Worcester improvement strategy that we've stayed the course on for a number of reasons. Primarily, they are the right areas to focus on, and 2, we've not met our success in those areas. But I'm going to talk about some successes there. In our Worcester improvement strategy, there are 4 key areas: 3rd and 4th grade literacy skills and reading proficiency, the achievement of our English language learners, of which at least 40% of our students are identified as English language learners, our achievement of students with disabilities, where at least a quarter of the students in this district are identified as having a disability, and college and career readiness. How well are our students doing through high school, and how well do they do once they graduate and leave the Worcester Public Schools. A huge success in this work has been working with the school committee and the community to move to increasing our graduation requirements, beginning with the entering ninth grade class in the fall of 2013. We have now paralleled our graduation requirements with the more rigorous set of requirements of Mass Core. There may be those in this audience and in the community who would say, well, if you don't have 100% of your students graduating with the current graduation requirements, what are you creating when you create even higher requirements? We're creating greater links to success to college and careers. Research, all of the data very clear, not just in Massachusetts, not just in Central Mass, but across this country, that the pathway to college and careers are exactly the same. The Board of Higher Education recently revised its admission criteria for state colleges and universities, and to have anything less for our graduation requirements that would allow our students to be able to enter state colleges and universities would be a travesty. It would be educational malpractice. And that is the reason that we have worked very hard to increase our graduation requirements. But with increasing those requirements becomes a set of challenges. Unfortunately, in the Commonwealth many years ago, we did something to the term college that's unconscionable. We designated courses as college-level courses that actually have a destination to nowhere. There are more low-level remedial type courses, and yet we have been marketing these courses to parents and students as having you on a trajectory for success. With moving into the Mass Core aligned graduation requirements, we will be eliminating those college-level courses. Bottom line is, Algebra 1 is Algebra 1. There is but one Algebra 1. Anything below Algebra 1 is another course. It's another place in math. So you don't have a college level of Algebra 1. You may have pre-algebra or another general math course, but it's not Algebra 1. So Algebra 1 is that course. Now, we can increase the rigor beyond that course, within that course, and go beyond and stretch activities and learning. And that's what we're going to focus on. Not how do we create remedial level courses that we're marketing that kids can take somewhere, but how do we take that course and infuse even greater rigor and meet students where they are and provide the interventions and the supports and the activities for those that are ready to go to the next level, as well as those who need support to get to that standard. And so that becomes a huge challenge as we think about creating this new, establishing and implementing these new graduation requirements. But it will position our students, our graduates, to be successful when they go on to college and careers. We hear over and over again about the need for mid-level jobs that require more than a high school diploma and less than the 4 years of college. But embedded within those expectations are high levels of literacy and numeracy, the ability to analyze, synthesize, create, and formulate opinions, to debate issues, to be able to handle the changing work environment with every field changing rapidly, and to be able to access the training programs for that company to be successful, for that employee to be successful. That's what we are working on in the Worcester Public Schools. Our graduation rates have continued to improve, though incrementally. And I think that's one of our greatest challenges is how do we begin to accelerate the progress? We've shown slow, steady progress, but we've got to accelerate some progress. This year's graduation requirements based on the 2012 numbers, 73.2% of our students will graduate in 4 years. And that's a huge statistic both within the Commonwealth with urban districts as well as nationally, where nationally only about 50% of students will graduate in 4 years from high school. We've heard all of the stories about the dropout factories. And so while we can celebrate the 73% and the nearly 78% of the students who will graduate in 5 years, we have to focus on who's in those graduation rates. Who are the students that aren't making it in the 4 years? Who are the students who aren't making it in 5 years? And what are we doing to support their learning needs? Our goal is to create a strong portfolio of school options across this city to meet the unique and individual needs of every student. When you look at the performance of our schools, 48% of our schools are level 1 or level 2 schools. 48%. We're one school shy of 50% of our schools being level 1 or level 2. That's huge in terms of performance. Does that mean that every level 1 and level 2 schools has the highest MCAS pass rates in the Commonwealth and in the city? No, it doesn't. What it does mean, though, is that there are practices there that allow students to learn at an expected or higher rate, and that the students are being supported, the level of professional development is aligned, and the culture of that school is about student success and nurturing the adults to support that level of student success. And so it's been important for us to look at what's happening across the district. We're the first district in the Commonwealth to embrace innovation schools with multiple numbers. We have 8 innovation schools, again, as part of creating that strong portfolio of school options across the city. In a few minutes, Mort will share with you our phenomenal success with advanced placement. Again, I believe, and with all due respect of the Research Bureau's question about academically selective schools, I am very clear that I believe in open access to all students to schools to be able to be successful and to try and to give their best. It's important that, as we've done within our advanced placement work, that we open up access. Commissioner mentioned data-driven decision-making. One of the things that we learned from our administering the PSAT to our 10th graders and 9th graders is what number of students show potential to be successful in advanced placement courses. We are now using those data to make sure that students who have demonstrated the potential beyond what has been seen in the classroom have the opportunity to access those courses and to find success. And like I said, I'll let Mort talk about the phenomenal success we've had in both increasing the number of students enrolled in advanced placement as well as increasing the number of qualifying scores for that work. In addition to all of the work we've done, we have schools that are both recognized on the state and the national level. Many of you saw and celebrated with us. Worcester Technical High School is featured in Education Nation on the Today Show this past fall, Not Your Grandfather's Vocational School, yet representing what's important in 21st century education. How do we link the relevance of what it is we're learning to potential career and college focus? And they're doing that very well. We've seen South High School recognized for its advanced placement and other work. University Park Campus School continues to be a national model for success, and how, again, you pair what students need with what they ought to learn, and you help close those gaps, and creating a culture of success. And so those are just a few of our schools, but we can talk about Worcester Arts Magnet School that had 100% of its students pass the 3rd grade MCAS test last year. These are real data points and the things that we're excited about. Finally, as we think about where we are, we are very encouraged with what's happening with our level 4 schools. 2 of our 3 level 4 schools, the 3rd one is just starting this year, but 2 of our level 4 schools are in their 3rd year of turnaround, and the early results are very encouraging. Union Hill and Chandler Elementary have done it extremely well. And we are learning from their work, and they're learning from work across the district, because ultimately our goal is to make sure that no school is in harm's way. And yet to be able to infuse best practices, not gimmicks, to create bumps in test scores, but that work that is sustainable, that students can take with them as they leave. We are building an infrastructure for success in the Worcester Public Schools. And because we are building an infrastructure and not building a building on a shallow foundation, it will take longer for the sustainable progress to be there. But do know it is happening, it is quantifiable, it is real, and we see it in terms of our enrollment increases and the success of individual students. So I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Boone. Okay, so our last speaker is Mort Orlov. We seem to have some technical difficulties, but okay, great. Thanks, Mort.
Well, good morning. It's great to be here in Worcester. I will tell you that I've learned a great deal in my workings here in the city. So you probably got from my bio that I'm a bit of an accidental educator, and I hope you'll bear with me this morning. I'm fortunate to be on a panel with such distinguished colleagues as the Commissioner and the Superintendent. I want to acknowledge the Research Bureau, Roberta, for inviting me to join you this morning. I also want to acknowledge the National Math and Science Initiative, which provided originally an investment grant in Massachusetts, about $13 million back in 2007, to help us get this program started. I have my colleague, the Regional Director for the National Math and Science Initiative, Dale Fleury, with me this morning, right over here. And also here in town, many supporters, but in particular I want to acknowledge Dennis Berkey and WPI for the work they've done on behalf of the district and on behalf of the program. And I have some colleagues from WPI in the audience today, and I really appreciate their being here with us. Commissioner, thank you so much. We actually didn't coordinate this, but the Commissioner has set me up wonderfully with his piece on data. So I'm going to jump right to data. I'm going to show you some data, so we'll drill down for a moment, if you bear with me. But I would challenge you with this thought as you look at some of the numbers and think about it. Data, in the terms we've been talking about it this morning, I think can do two things. Clearly, there's an instructional component. How do we improve instruction? How do we measure the improvement in instruction? And that is clearly something, and I'll show you a little bit on that today. But I think from your perspective, the question is, how does data inform policy and your future investments? And if you walk away from this morning's presentation with those thoughts, I think it will be very helpful as you address the challenges that we face going forward together. So what is it that we do with the Massachusetts Math and Science Initiative? And I would tell you, I've got a slide here. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. There's the mission. We drive a school culture of high expectations. We do this by vastly increasing participation in students in advanced placement math, science, English courses. You may not know what an advanced placement math, science, English course is. I know some of you have taken those courses. They began in 1955. But did not become prevalent in public education probably until really the late 70s, early 80s, and it's been an upward climb since then. Basically, it's an entry-level college course that you take with your high school teacher in a high school setting and take a national exam at the end, scored on a scale of 1 to 5. A 5 is about a college A. A 3 is about a college C+, B-. And if you get a 3, 4, or 5 on the national exam, then you will probably get either advanced placement or credit or both from your gaining institution of higher education. So that's, in a nutshell, what advanced placement is. What I love about it is that it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's transparent. So a student that earns a 5 coming out of Burncoat, South, any school in Worcester, it's as good as a 5 in Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, or Wellesley. And that says volumes about what's going on here, and I'll show you some of that in a minute. College success. In your packets, you have packets that I've given you. So if you're in the audience, hopefully you have something that looks like this. On the front side, we've done a brief look at college success. What I would point out to you is that here's what we know preliminarily, and that is that MMSI students at two-year schools stay from freshman year to sophomore year of college at a rate 25% higher than other students in Massachusetts. And in four-year schools, it's 10%. And those percentages hold up whether you're white, low income, African American, or Hispanic. So we believe that the payoff here is where our communities will be in another 10 years based on what our students are going to do when they come to institutions like we are today, institutions of higher education. Because we know the solution set for our communities is not based in simply a high school diploma. So the college success piece, so another way to summarize what we do is we help create a culture of excellence. We measure everything, And that's not just my Army background, that's, I think, good business in the business of education. And we reward success. And again, the commissioner and I did not coordinate this, but he mentioned, really, talked about how do you get at this. And on the left side of your folder, you'll also see, you may not have realized that Worcester was featured on the cover of the New York Times back in 2011, but there's a great article. Now, they went with the incentive piece, because we do offer awards and rewards for great performance. So that was the tagline. That's what gets you on the cover, right? But it's a great story, ultimately, to Melinda's point, about student achievement and what becomes of these students. So a great teacher here in Worcester, and a great story if you want to drill down and take a look at that. So with that, let me jump into some of the data here quickly. This map shows where we are statewide today. The Worcester group is North High School, South, Worcester Tech, Burncoat, and most recently Claremont. You see it at the top part of the slide in the central part of the state. But you can also see that we have a footprint in 61 schools in 51 districts across the Commonwealth. So not only do I have a perspective on Worcester, but I have a perspective on Worcester relative to where we are in the state, and I'll share some data with you on that in a moment. Just a couple top stories on our program statewide. Last year, we supported 51% of the exams in math, science, English taken by low-income students in the state, yet we're only in about 14% of the schools. So I'm very proud of the work we're doing in reaching as many students as possible, which is essential to us, because whether you have an exam school or you don't have an exam school, the strength of the community is going to be measured by the strength of all the students, ultimately. And then you can see the minority increases. That's a one-year increase that we're showing you there, 1 year over the next year. Now let me jump to Worcester. Red is before the program, and this is for our current schools. You see them in the bottom, Burncoat, Claremont, North, South, and Tech. You can see the enrollments in math, science, and English advanced placement courses and the growth over that period of time. We've added about 500 student enrollments, so call it a 105% increase. I would tell you program-wide, we have seen the following. When I look at all 53 schools for which I have data, we've had an increase in enrollment of 110%, and we've had an increase in performance, in other words, qualifying scores, 3, 4s, 5s, of 109%. So we've moved the needle in who's participating, and oh, by the way, for those of you familiar with the movie Casablanca, we're not rounding up the usual suspects. We're moving to the left and the right and bringing more students to the table. And those students are doing better. These are exams taken up. Now, again, this has dropped off 1 year to 2012, because that's the data that I have right now. But again, a great increase in exams taken. And there's the performance, scores of 3 or greater. So you can see the increase. We had a slight tick down last year, and there are some little flows in the program. But overall, we're way above where we began. So this is the success part of this morning's presentation. Now, a little comparison. I told you I'd show you where you stand. So let me explain the lines here. The blue line, it starts at 2006 at 90 and goes to 140. That is all public schools in the United States. The orange or gold line, all public schools in Massachusetts. The green are the 4 Worcester schools for which I have data. Claremont, we have no data yet. And you can see that you were well below the national average, and we're right kind of running at the national average. Great success. The challenge, to the other part of this morning's program, is now to move Worcester to the Massachusetts average and beyond, and I believe we can do that. Just to give you another measure, when we look at gains from 08, the base year, to last year, all Massachusetts public schools had an increase in qualifying scores of 41%. The Worcester schools in the program had an increase of 105%. So that's, again, a great return on investment and illustrative of what's possible. Here's numbers for low-income students, another 198% increase. Here's the numbers for African American and Hispanic students, up from 19 to 50 to 60 range. Here it's African American and Hispanic students plotted in the fashion where I can compare them fairly to these other populations. What's interesting about this chart is note that the gold line is below the blue line. The gold line, orange line, is Massachusetts. So we have underperformed the country when we look at our African American and Hispanic students. But you'll note in 2011, we start to pass through the national line, and part of the reason for that is, quite frankly, the work being done here in Worcester. And you can see the growth there that we've seen with our African American Hispanic student population. Here's another cut. This is women in math and science. So we know that this has been a challenge area for us. And again, we are moving in absolutely the right direction. Huge success for our female student population in our high schools in Worcester. How do we do it? I don't have time to go into all the details, but here it is, 4 big parts: student support, program management, teacher support, and we do offer awards for great performance. One comment on student support: at the 3 o'clock position, we do Saturday study sessions. And we will get literally hundreds of students coming in to do another 6 hours on calculus, biology, physics, English literature, and because we do English as well as math and science. So that's, my time is up, and that really takes me to the end. A couple highlights. I could go on and on about the highlights, but just a lot of great success. But again, we still got plenty of work to do, which really gets back to my final piece, which was my entry piece. As you think about the policies going forward, as you think about our investments going forward, hopefully you'll use the data, follow the data, and perhaps we'll have you on the team going forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mort. So in the time remaining, I'd like to open up the floor to questions for our speakers. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir.
This is for Dr. Boone. You had mentioned about the... Thank you. You had mentioned about looking at programs for our best and brightest students. And you talked about exam schools versus international baccalaureate, which has been a discussion, as well as perhaps looking at courses, more rigorous courses for our high school students. What are your feelings on those issues? Thank you.
As I indicated in my comments, I'm very, very much pro open access to student learning and rigorous programs. I am most supportive of whatever program of studies adds value to a student's high school career. And, you know, again, the mayor has appointed a committee to look at the options of an exam school and an international baccalaureate school. For me, International Baccalaureate program is an internationally recognized program that adds value to a student's high school transcript, in that admissions counselors recognize that the students have taken a certain level of rigorous courses. They've moved into higher levels of foreign language and more in-depth study of certain content. Exam schools also can offer that, but too often the focus on the exam school is who is in and how you get in versus what happens on the other side of the exam. And so I'm looking forward to seeing exactly what the recommendations will be in that upcoming report. But I'm very clear. I want whatever adds value to a student's high school program that leads to increased opportunities for college and careers.
Since 1993, when school reform became the law in Massachusetts, local school boards have seen more and more involvement or intrusion on the state level, depending on your point of impact. Dr. Chester mentioned, in addition to student achievement goals, the negative impact of teacher contracts, longevity, academic credentials, and I assume teacher tenure is part of this package. Given the negative impact, and given the fact that the State Department controls the purse strings and therefore needs to know how that money is being used, what can we look forward to in terms of reforms dealing with teacher tenure and longevity and credits as being part of the state's involvement in local school board operations?
So to clarify, is this working?
Yes.
Okay. So to clarify, I didn't say anything about negative impact, right? What I said was what we pay for in our contracts has limited nexus, limited impact on student performance, and it's rare in teacher contracts that we pay for productivity, that our teachers who are high performers are able to earn more because of that performance. Our teachers who are low performers, that impacts their compensation. So I think of it as an opportunity cost, because we're paying for, in terms of compensation, we're paying for things that we now understand in ways that we didn't have as clear an understanding a decade ago, have limited relevance to whether or not student results are occurring. So there's a couple of things that we're doing to try to leverage these new understandings, right? One that is a statewide initiative is around new requirements around teacher evaluation. So this year and again next year, every district in the state is implementing a new approach to teacher and administrator evaluation. And a cornerstone of that approach is you have to measure each teacher's as well as each administrator's impact on student learning. This is the first time that's been a requirement. And that has to be part of the calculus, part of the way in which a teacher and an administrator in the Commonwealth will be evaluated in terms of their performance. The second initiative that we have going is that we are starting to look very systematically at the research that's available, starting to work with our superintendents. We're starting with our urban superintendents at what's the evidence around how we use our district budgets. And can we get to a point where, rather than designing district budgets in a manner that's driven primarily by inertia, by what we've paid for in the past is what we continue to pay for, can we begin to look at options other than what we've paid for in the past that promise greater productivity? And again, the biggest element in the budget is compensation. The third thing that we're doing is we have, under the authority of the 2010 Achievement Gap Act, we've taken receivership of the Lawrence Public School District. And this is a district, I won't spend much time on it, but it's a district where half of the kids are graduating. The level of dysfunction is enormous and has been for a number of years. And so it led us to the point where just over a year ago, we exercised the authority in the new statute to take over the district, what the statute calls receivership. And one of the pieces that we're engaged in as we speak is revamping the whole district budget, including the central office budget, but including the approach to compensation. And so I expect that if we have this conversation a year from now, we'll be able to show you a whole new model for thinking about collective bargaining agreement and thinking about compensation than what exists in almost 100% of our districts today. Now, these are tough challenges because you don't make these changes based on solely based on the empirical evidence, right? Inertia is a powerful force. And, if you're on a school committee, right, it may make sense based on the evidence to revamp how you go about your compensation systems, but getting there and how threatening that's going to be to the status quo and the politics of that are going to be a huge part of the landscape. But we're hoping that, particularly with the new approach to teacher evaluation, that makes more transparent who our strong performers are, who our weaker performers are. It makes it harder to just assume that everybody should get equal compensation simply by virtue of how many years they've been in their position and how many graduate credits they've earned.
I think we have time for one more question, so, ma'am.
I'm Landy Johnson from Assumption College, where we're very glad to have the Research Bureau back on our premises again. Because of what was said before, I also have to say Doherty High, 1975, which also means I went to Chandler Junior High when Jesse Jackson came there and had us stand on the chairs and say, "I am somebody." My kids went to Chandler Magnet School, and I want to bring up a teacher assignment issue that I experienced, even though it's a little bit old, but this is how it can be frustrating for parents, and I hope this can make it real for some people. When my kids started out at Chandler Magnet, it was relatively new, and they had an experimental two-way bilingual program, which ended up falling by the wayside, which is another story. But we had a problem in the school in that we had some wonderful teachers who were able to speak Spanish, and they were bumped by teachers with more seniority who didn't speak Spanish. And the site council and the principal all felt we needed more Spanish-speaking teachers at the school, not just for Spanish subjects, but in the regular classrooms. And it was frustrating to not be able to say, we need a particular qualification. And it doesn't have to be Spanish. There could be some other need that the school has for a certain qualification. And the inability to say, we need a teacher that has that qualification is very frustrating. So I wonder if Dr. Boone might bring me up to date on whether teachers can still be bumped and whether there's an ability to seek qualifications.
Thank you for the question. And again, we're very fortunate for all of our colleges and universities in the city and the partnerships and the work that we do together. I had a wonderful meeting just recently with Dr. Cesareo, and so we have some great things on the horizon. Let me also introduce Lenny Zalauskas, the president of the Education Association of Worcester here on the front row. Lenny and I spent a lot of time together debating issues, the philosophical issues and other things. But to your point of your question, there still exists in our teacher contract a transfer rule that certain positions are posted every few years, and as a result of that, more senior teachers or teachers can bid into those positions, creating that level of turnover. That remains an ongoing concern. In our last contract negotiations, we were able to infuse into one of the criteria the use of a principal interview to be able to address whether or not it is a right fit for the person, even though they've expressed an interest in a particular building. And so now there are 3 or 4 criteria, and they carry equal weight, but the principal interview was a new piece into that contract in the last contract negotiations. That does remain a challenge, and again, it remains a challenge in that you build a team. You focus on the practices and the expectations, and the momentum is developed. And every time we have a change in the team member, we lose some momentum. We will have someone that may not have participated in the same professional development based on the instructional focus of a particular school. And so how do we begin to address that gap? That is something that we continue to talk about in terms of how do we make sure we have the right people before our children. One of the things I've been very clear to say particularly through our level 4 schools process, that we have phenomenal teachers within the Worcester Public Schools. We have some outstanding teachers. And as an urban district, we have very low teacher turnover. Many urban districts can turn over at least 25 to 35% of their teachers on an annual basis. Our numbers are nowhere near that. Now, we have a number of teachers who are approaching that age of retirement and are opting for that. And so that creates space in the hiring pool. But I was very clear that when all of the options that were available to me as recommendations to the school committee in terms of how we turn around school, one is to turn the school over to an outside educational management authority. One was to close the school. Another was to replace at least 50% of the teachers in the building. And another dealt with creating the requirement for annual teacher evaluation and the right fit for teachers. The last two options have certainly impacted principals and how many principals have been in place for more than 2 years and the need for fresh thought and fresh thinking in those schools. I chose the option that did not require at least 50% of the teachers to be removed because, again, when you look at the schools across Worcester, that is not where we are. We hear a lot about Teach for America, an outstanding program that's filling some gaps in teaching corps across the country. We're fortunate because of the number of teacher education programs right here in our community that we're still able to fill those positions through more traditional methods. And so our greatest challenge is how do we get those wonderful student teachers who enjoy being in our schools the opportunity to be hired in our schools because we have so low turnover. And so our teachers are responding well to the direction that I have set forth as superintendent, the changing professional development. We're excited about the new Massachusetts frameworks that include the Common Core because it gives us a chance now to move away from teaching to a program to really building that foundation of a strong written curriculum and teachers fully understanding what the standards mean and how they get from the standard to their development of an exciting lesson and implementing it in that way. And so, yeah, those challenges remain in terms of the teacher turnover. One of the things one of the consistent autonomies that our innovation schools have each sought and achieved, the 8 innovation schools, is the ability to have a greater level of staffing autonomy, primarily to be able to address that issue of that teacher turnover as they begin to build capacity to get the results. And so, again, we're early in our innovation schools. We'll see what happens with that over time.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Research Bureau, I'd like to thank you for being here this morning. I want to thank the Research Bureau for creating this forum to shine a spotlight, particularly on the successes, which we don't hear a lot about, the successes of the Worcester Public Schools. And I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists one last time.